Audacious
We're
Rebel.
always on purpose. We're just not always conscious of how we're being on purpose. So to constantly ask, is that true? To not believe the thought that you're having in this moment. The body knows how to move, but the mind interrupts it very, very frequently. The moment the energy starts to get more potent, or the experience starts to become more alive, we will internally self-sabotage it so that we can go back into what feels comfortable and normal for us. So working on increasing our capacity to have self-esteem and love thyself is directly going to lead us into greater, more expanded states.
Audacious Rebel. There are those among us who don't just speak of light, they carry it. They walk the edge of seen and unseen, not to escape the world, but to help it remember. My guest today is one such soul. Heather Ivany is more than a teacher, more than a healer. She's a map maker of the sacred. With over 2 decades guiding others through yoga, breath, Akashic records, and sovereign leadership, she reminds us that intuition is not a luxury, it's a birthright. That the body is not a burden, but a temple. And that remembering who we are is not an event, it's a daily divine rebellion. Her work weaves spiritual discipline with soul freedom. She teaches not to inform, but to awaken. Not to impress, but to initiate. And in a world starved for authenticity, she brings presence, clarity, and a deep reverence for the mystery we all carry inside. Today we open the space to explore the sacred within the structure, the divine within the dust, and I invite you to walk with me between the worlds as we welcome the sovereign, the guide, Heather Ivany. Heather, welcome to the part of the Audacious Rebel.
Thanks for having me. I'm a little taken aback. That's one of the most beautiful introductions I've ever heard. Well, yeah, thank you very much. I'm very, very flattered.
Thank you so much. I mean, when I looked at your website and I went through your work, I was really, really impressed. Did she born this way? Yeah, Heather, I always like to begin at the root. Was this always your world? Did you grow up immersed in spirituality, or was there a pivotal moment, maybe even a disruption that shifted you into this path? What made you decide to walk this road of sacred service?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think we all have sort of significant moments that leave a lasting imprint in us in our lifetime. But then I also think it's a series of accumulation of many layers adding up over time that lead us to the incarnation of the becoming that we are. So for me, I was never introduced to the spiritual realm the way that I practice it right now. I grew up in a religious home. We were a family that went to church once a week. And although I enjoyed the connection that I was introduced to be in contact and in communication with my divine self, the method that I was led to it, I asked a lot of questions. And in the end, I chose to lean in more towards spirituality because it felt more like home for me than the religious background that I had. Yeah. So it was about, I think it started in university. I chose to take some theology courses, world religion courses in university. And then I went through a little bit of a loneliness of being so far away from home. And one of the ways that I worked with that in university was by starting a meditation practice. And that led me into the realm of yoga, which for me was the first time that the physical body was introduced to the divine self. And that for me was the biggest click, I think, that I had to be able to embody the essence of consciousness and spirituality through movement and conscious patterning was something that I'd never experienced before. The religion that I grew up in was very much, you go and you sit in the pews and you listen and you leave, but this body just really wasn't invited in to the practice. So that would probably be my first pivotal experience in sort of things starting to open up in a more rapid or available way for me, was actually by bringing the physical body into the practice.
Understood.
Yeah.
And it's something you'd mentioned that because I felt the same way, cultured within religion myself, but coming from Trinidad and Tobago, there was diversity. So I had a neighbor who was Muslim, I had another neighbor who was Hindu, I had friends who were Orisha, so there was this amalgam of so many different beliefs, which in itself perpetuated my questions. As you began to walk that path, whether through yoga, meditation, or just life itself, what were some of the first gifts or inner capacities that began to awaken in you? Was there a moment you realized you were meant to guide others and not just walk this path alone?
I think I've always been a teacher by nature. So even when I was young, like I was a coach in my late teens to young people. I worked as a river guide in a capacity where I was leading high school kids on outdoor living trips. So I've always had a capacity to be in a position of leadership and teaching. And then I was just very much conscientious of how I wanted to be teaching. I had a lot of people trying to encourage me to move into the education system, and it wasn't really a system that I aligned with, but I knew that I enjoyed teaching. So it was just a process of more following the breadcrumbs into being a yoga teacher. Initially, that was how I started. I was going to lean into being a fitness instructor, but I don't have a body that I don't have a body that can do hard impact, repetitive movements over and over again without doing damage. So I knew that would be a very short journey. And when I was introduced to yoga, the modality, it just has so many different branches to it and how you can teach and play and create with it, that it just really gave me the opportunity to see how this could be a lifelong relationship with the practice. So the teaching of yoga has just systematically led me into teaching classes and then offering workshops and then doing teacher trainings and then retreats. And then eventually it got to a point where I didn't like the confinement of how I was working with yoga. When you do teacher trainings, you're a little bit confined with a curriculum that makes sense and that you need to get through in order to have a well-rounded teacher at the end. But I really wanted to go into the depths of consciousness. And so the Akashic Records was actually the doorway or the gateway that allowed me to work with people in a very relational field with consciousness.
Well, definitely we're going to explore that Akashic Records, but hold a minute. On this season of the podcast, we're exploring what it means to be a divine human, to remember our true essence beyond the roles and routines of everyday life. If you had to strip away all titles and tools, how would you describe the essence of what you are? What does it mean to you to be a divine human?
It's a big question. I would say, it's everything and nothing all at once. So to be divine and deny the human leaves the divine incomplete. And to focus solely on the human and leave out the divine, it's the same end result. So to be living an embodied divine human experience is the capacity to be able to allow the myriad of selves to be present without hierarchy, so that the spiritual self isn't made more special than the human self.
The spiritual self isn't made more special than the human self. You want to expound on that a bit?
I think oftentimes when we start to lean into developing and expanding our conscious self, whether it's being able to experience consciousness in a very present manner, or wanting to be able to communicate with the field, I think that there's what I notice in my trainings when I'm working with people, I spend more time inviting the humanness within them to sit at the table with us in the training. Whereas for so many, they want to somehow eradicate or transcend or overcome their humanness so that they can be a more conscious body. And for me, you can't have one without the other. Yeah, you can't. The polarities exist so that we can create. So if we're leaning into creating the becoming of ourselves, the version of ourselves that we're growing into, then all the mirrored parts of ourselves get to be there. So the parts of ourselves that think that we're not worthy to be in the company of consciousness. I see this a lot. The moment the energy starts to get more potent or the experience starts to become more alive, we will internally self-sabotage it so that we can go back into what feels comfortable and normal for us. So working on increasing our capacity to have self-esteem and love thyself is directly going to lead us into greater, more expanded states. The fear and the doubt that we have with being able to be in connection with consciousness, the part of ourselves that's an inner critic or has a really strong bullshit radar, that's also really necessary when we're embarking on where we're going, so that we don't follow the leader and we constantly check into what feels authentic and true for ourselves, so that our relationship becomes the one that it's meant to be, not the one that we're mimicking in that moment.
Understood clearly. Heather, your website opens with a powerful call. Awaken your inner wisdom. Embrace a life of presence and purpose. That feels less like branding and more like a blueprint for a conscious life. Can you break that down for us? What does it truly mean to awaken inner wisdom, and how is that connected to living with real presence and purpose?
Well, presence is where life exists. So if we feel a lack of aliveness in our form, one of the best things we can do is place ourselves next to living things and to be present with them. So present moment is where we get to have our sovereignty and our choice as to what we want to be deciding and choosing in that moment. So it's incredibly empowering. And how we trust the choices and the decisions that we're making is by getting to know ourselves on an intrinsic level. So the inner wisdom, to me, it's almost like it can be very intimidating to many different systems when someone can think independently. And so if we are trying to create a world where we get to have say over how we choose to live, it starts by being able to understand what it is that we want. And in order to understand what it is that we want, there needs to be opportunities to reflect inwardly without being uncomfortable with that. And I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable when they get quiet.
When you recognize the depth of conditioning that society has done from prenatal.
Yeah.
You know, when you speak of awakening inner wisdom and embracing a life of purpose, it raises something important for me. Are you suggesting that there's both an inner and an outer purpose? And if so, what's the relationship between the two? Can someone fulfill their outer roles, career, parenting, service, etc., without ever touching their inner purpose?
Oh, I think it's inseparable. I would say more that it's whether or not you're conscious of co-creating and co-participating with your purpose, or you're unconscious with it. And so, in a sense, if we take it to that conversation, we're always on purpose. We're just not always conscious of how we're being on purpose. So I'll give you an example. I was doing an Akashic reading with someone yesterday, and their desire was to be able to tap into their healing modality that was introduced to them 40 years ago. You know, someone had shared with them that they were a powerful healer, and this individual was in their late 60s and still searching for the way that they can offer healing energy out into the world. And when I went into the Akashic records and the information was coming in, what was showing up was just this deep connection that this person has with nature. They're actually a gardener by trade, and the deep relationship that they have with animals. And so it was simply a redirecting of perspective that happened in the Akashic reading to point out and bring into light that you've always been working with healing energy. You do it through the land, you do it through the earth, you do it by bringing plants back to life and communicating with them and understanding what it is that they need: more sun, more dirt, more water, more friends nearby, whatever it is that the garden needs in order to be able to thrive and be able to fulfill its purpose. And this individual had just never shifted the lens of the lighthouse to be able to see that that is healing energy, because the image that they had was just being of service to people and humanity in some way. So I think a lot of us are actually more on purpose than we give ourselves credit for, but the lens is just looking in a particular direction and we're not seeing our greatness because we're so close to it. It's hard to see it as great when we're with it every day. And when,
You're saying primarily that what we may be striving to be, we already are.
Essentially, yes. And once we can see it in the light of once we can see it in its own light, then now we have resource to play with it. We have agency to work with, to be able to explore it and grow and expand it and see if we can augment it in certain ways. But when we can't touch it, then it's in an unconscious way that we're participating with it.
So I guess that's the intentionality.
Yeah, exactly. And so to answer your question, like the internal, can we be internally focused on ourselves and externally working on purpose with work? For me, they're not two different hats. They're one and the same. And oftentimes it's more like if I'm thriving, say, in my family life, but I'm struggling in my career, one of the ways that I would encourage someone to look at it is, what is it that works really well in your family life that's not being allowed into your career? Right? So you're just allowing the layers of yourself to be able to spill over into the other parts of you so that it becomes less exhausting. That's the other thing I find, when we sort of have everything compartmentalized, it can get quite exhausting. Like, okay, now I'm going to sit and meditate, and then that's done. And now I'm going to wake up my kids and get ready for work. And then that's done. And now and so when we're constantly putting on hats of like, worker or parent or friend or lover and taking the hats on and off, it becomes very exhausting because the conscious stream can't flow through it. And the more that we can allow everything to be almost sacred, if we want to play with that languaging, then it starts to become much more fluid, less turning the tap on and off and just letting just this very gentle conscious stream flow through the day.
You're speaking here and immediately this thought just came to mind. So how would you define success?
Well, I think that's very personal. Like my personal success is being able to feel love in everything that I do. But my personal success would not be the same as someone else's personal success. So if I'm making really good money, but I don't feel like I'm having a relationship of love with the people that I'm working for, then it's not going to feel complete for me. If I'm thriving in my business, but my kids aren't getting any of my time and attention and there's no connection with them, then everything just feels a little bit less alive. So for me, success is all the different pockets that I engage with. Is there an infusion of love taking place here or not? Where can there be more love in this moment? And when it feels like love is in the house, that to me is success.
Understood. So it boils down to your personal foundation or value system overall as it pertains to all aspects of your existence.
Yeah, I would say so. How would you answer that question, if you don't mind me putting it back on you?
I think basically success is our conscious evolution. And if we're not growing consciously, I don't think we're being successful.
Right.
I think our physical existence is all integral in that aspect because, as you identify, they're all work together,
Mm.
but this is what it means to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
I know yoga and meditation are not just tools in your practice, they are like foundational pillars in how you live, lead, and teach. But for many people, yoga is just stretching, and
Mhm.
meditation is just stress relief. Can you take us deeper into what these practices actually are at their essence? What does yoga truly mean? What does meditation actually do, not just for the body, but for the soul? And how does these two work together in the journey of awakening?
I think that the stress decompression is where we start with meditation. It's
Stress decompression. Okay.
right. So it's very rare that someone will come into meditation because life is perfect and they want to just experience something different. Most people come into meditation in crisis, right? They're seeking some sort of a mental rest or some sort of a way to have emotional regulation, an opportunity to feel a sense of peace or calm. So the initial activation of and any way that we're working with it, I think is actually totally fine. There's no it doesn't have to be because the layers work so intimately and intrinsically and they can't be separated. You might be doing a yoga practice because you enjoy the stretching that it gives you and it keeps you limber and it keeps you mobile, but everything is energy. So by twisting your body and shaping it and molding it in different positions, you're going to influence the conscious stream whether you like it or not. So
Mm.
if someone's coming into a yoga practice and they're doing it purely for a physical reason, because they want a certain body type or they want to feel stronger, or they want to feel more flexible, I see no problem with that. And what I watch over time with everyone is that you don't have to adjust yourself for the practice. The practice will work on you the way that it works on you. So
Right.
you just showing up and participating with it is all that's needed for the alchemy to start to happen. Same with meditation. But what I find oftentimes happens is that we start off with really good intentions of this is why I want to do what I'm doing. And then when we either reach that, let's say, for example, we reach that goal of experiencing peace and calm in meditation. For a lot of people, this is the end point. So I'm experiencing peace and calm. I finally arrived. This must be it. And it can be. And there's so much more that we can explore when we're in that meditation current. So the ability to allow the system to get subtle, to get soft, I would almost use the languaging like more feminine by nature, being in a receivership state. This is what allows us the opportunity to slip into the meditation current. And then when we're in that current, it's kind of endless what we can do. We can simply stay in receivership and watch and witness how consciousness wants to dance with us. We can work in a more related field where we get to ask questions and receive answers through the different clairs in our body. We can lean into future possibilities and what we want to be growing and exploring for ourselves through visualization and, if you want to use the languaging, law of attraction. So there's so many different ways that we can play once we're in the current. And for many people, the peace and calm is the end point when it's literally the baseline for everything else.
Understood.
Yeah. And then same with the physical body. I've watched people come in and they hate the shavasana at the end of a yoga practice, that lying down on the back and being completely still, vulnerable, if you will, in a room full of strangers, lying on your back with your eyes closed. For a lot of people, that is an incredibly intimidating position to be in, right?
Mm.
But over time, as the body becomes more adapted to the practice, for some individuals, that shavasana becomes what they look forward to most in the practice is the opportunity to actually lie and be still and experience that. So I love to just let the field work on the body the way it wants to work on the body. And I'm playing more with the cognitive brain and how it interrupts the process of energy with people. the body knows how to move, but the mind interrupts it very, very frequently. And so that's what I'm playing with. I don't know if I've answered your question, but
Oh, most definitely.
okay.
You've mentioned the term quite a bit, and I know it's part of your practices as well. But for those who've heard the term but aren't quite aware of what it means, what exactly are the Akashic records, and how do they help us reconnect with the deeper truth of who we are?
So the word Akasha is a Sanskrit word. Sanskrit is, if you go to a yoga class, it's when you hear like someone will say come into warrior one, or they'll say Virabhadrasana one. Virabhadrasana Sanskrit. So Sanskrit predates Hinduism and Buddhism. It's an ancient language. So the word Akasha is Sanskrit for consciousness or space. Or sorry, pardon me, it's Sanskrit for space or spirit. So if someone is more science-based, then space directly translates into quantum field, right? It's the study of everything. And spirit is another word that we use for consciousness. So all of those words are interchangeable. So if someone's listening to this for the first time and hasn't heard the word Akashic records before, you have heard it just in a different language. So connect to it through quantum field, connect to it through consciousness. But when we go specifically into the terminology of an Akashic record, what that is that every single form of consciousness has its own imprint in the vibrational field around us. And so your particular blueprint of your soul is called your Akashic records. It's like a divine blueprint of your soul. So we delineate it into the understanding of it being a timeline of past, present, and future. But then we also have to have a part of ourselves that understands that what we're talking about doesn't exist in the three-dimensional material realm. It exists in other dimensions where there is no time or space. So it's the timeline of your soul, but then when we pop it back into, say, the fifth dimension, it's time and space collapses. So it's everything everywhere all at once. Right?
Right. Now, I've heard the term before. I've read some material about it. It was kind of hard to conceptualize at the time, because when I thought of records, I'm thinking about probably like a big library with a lot of books, with information, so to say. And I think in some way it is that, but as you identify, it's a different dimension. So the understanding of it may be a bit different to how we may conceptualize it in 3 dimension, right?
Right. So the imagery that we use is to help the mind conceptualize what it is that we're talking about. So if we use your example of the library itself would be the Akashic field, right? It holds everything. And then every single book on the shelf is someone else's Akashic records, but also it's all things consciousness. So if we can stretch it a little bit further, you can go into you can go into the Akashic records of cedarwood trees. You can go into the Akashic records of a pet. You can go into the Akashic records of the species of lions. And so everything that is sentient has an Akashic record connected to it. And even non-sentient things do as well. So you can go into the Akashic records of a house or business as well. And I know that I'm getting a little bit far away from where we were talking, but the books on the shelf, each book would represent someone's Akashic records. And when you open the book, essentially when you open someone's Akashic records, you're getting filtered information about that book. So the one thing that I do like to sort of call out is that oftentimes people get misled or misinformed in that they assume that when they open up the Akashic records, how they can tell that they're in the records is because they can see an etheric library. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for 5 years and I don't get a library when I open up people's Akashic records, right? So it's one way that some people do. Some people will see an etheric library when they open up the Akashic records, but it's not the only way that you can get access to the records. Yeah. But that example is a great way to sort of conceptualize what it is that we're talking about. The other way that people get confused is when they hear record, they think it's like a record player. Record just means like it's recorded into the timeline of the etheric realm. It's imprinted. And that's more of a conversation for quantum physics to understand how things get imprinted in the atmosphere that's around us, but that's the quantum field.
Understood.
Yeah.
But what is the process of accessing the Akashic records like? Is it something a few can do, or this is something you believe we all have the capacity to access ourselves?
Yeah, we all have the capacity. Many of us are doing it unconsciously, and working with the Akashic records directly it's just that. It's a direct way to work with the Akashic records, but we are all co-participating and co-creating with the energy in the field around us all the time. So when someone is getting more focused and working with how to, like on demand, I guess, for lack of a better terminology, be able to open the records and close the records, you're just doing it on a more conscious level. And the reason why all of us have the capacity to be able to access the records is because the bridge, how I work with the Akashic records, the bridge between the physical and the non-physical is through our senses. So all of us have senses. And in the physical material body that we have, we get to experience taste and smell and hearing and sight and touch. And as we journey into the non-physical realm, how I picture it is the density of your physical sense of, let's say, sight will start to lighten and become more internal rather than external until it starts to move into what we call a clair. So there's clairvoyant, which is the inner seeing. There's clair audio, which is hearing. There's clairsentient, which is touch. There's claircognizance, which is your inner knowing. And then there's smell and there's taste as well. But I work with those four. I work with touch, knowing, hearing, and visual. And so when someone says, well, I don't know if I can access the records, for me, it's less about, do you have the skill set and the tools to access the records? Because of course you do, because you have your senses. So it's just a lighter form of your senses. What inhibits people from being able to read the records or not read the records is their human conditioning. Right. So if they have a belief system that they can't open it up, if they are fearful of being able to open it, if their self-esteem is if they don't feel worthy to be in the company of, this is what I spend more time with in releasing the barriers or the obstacles or the resistance in an Akashic training than actually, sprinkling magical fairy dust on people to be able to open it up. Right?
I understand. So it's more about our conditioning, our fears, because basically,
yeah, and it can also be just lack of not working the muscle. So if you want to be able to run a marathon, you have to train and practice on a consistent, regular basis to get you to the point where you can run 30 or 40K. It's a practice, it's a training. And what I find really interesting is when we move into the spiritual realm or the energetic realm, is we have been taught that you're either born with it or you're not. But every other thing that we want in life, we are aware that we need to be able to have a discipline, a consistency, and a focus in order to be able to achieve it. But when we move into the energetic realm, it's like, oh, you're either born with it or you're not. And so that was for me how I believed for many, many years until someone was like, no, like you can read the Akashic records. Let me show you how. And so it's a muscle that people need to, your whole conversation is about remembering the divine self. It's the remembering of how to be able to work with this part of ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you share a moment, either personal or from your clients, where working in the records brought about a profound shift or realization that changed everything?
Happens a lot. Like even just what we would say is like like it seems like an insignificant shift in perspective, but it's that ripple effect afterwards of like, oh my goodness, like I can't even look at my day the same way. So that example that I gave of the gentleman that I was doing the reading on yesterday, where he's a gardener by nature, the email that came through to me today was like, I see everything differently now that I can see that my healing energy is now infused into the gardening that I do. It's like I have a totally different lens on when I'm in my vocation now. And he's been doing this for 20 years or plus 20 years. Right. So there's those ones that are, seemingly small, but they create these like almost like blow your hair back kind of like whoa experiences. I think for me, what is like the most pleasure to be able to witness is in an Akashic training when someone reads the Akashic records and in a way that they can't argue their way out of being able to read the Akashic records and have that moment of like awakening into the, oh my gosh, this is actually happening and I did it. That for me is like a super honor to be able to witness and watch someone have that moment. But I've had experiences where I've been with women and they haven't been aware that they're pregnant, and in the Akashic records that comes through, and so that's like been a big shift for them is leaving the session and going and doing a pregnancy test and coming back to me and letting me know that they're pregnant. I've also had people just do such big shifts in that they have a traditional career as a CEO and working in a very high executive position, and they're just wanting to have more of an energetic component in their life. So I watch the bravery of them, dismantling their life and moving into working in a more energetic way. Now they might be taking the Akashic records and augmenting it with something that they're already doing to make it more profound. So I've had someone work with, she was a CEO in business, and now she works as a solo entrepreneur in coaching CEOs on how to bring more consciousness into the workplace so that it becomes a more meaningful experience for people.
Heather, do you see any misconceptions or even misuses of the Akashic records in the spiritual space today? How can we approach these sacred tools with reverence instead of spiritual consumerism?
Well, for me, first and foremost, I remind people when we're doing a session that you're sovereign, and everything that comes through in this session, you get choice as to whether or not you want to align with it and follow that breadcrumb or not. And I think that's the biggest, I think for me personally, that's one of the biggest gifts that those of us that are in positions of leadership can offer people that are watching, witnessing, and participating with us, is that whatever comes through at the end of the day, you get to decide if this aligns with you or doesn't align with you. And it's also reminding people that when you choose not to follow through with something that comes through in an Akashic reading, you're not falling out of the graces and the good books with the energies that work with you. And for a lot of people, I think that that's still a deep imprint. It's almost like the Santa Claus story that we're told. If you're good, you'll be rewarded and you'll be able to have these things. And so when when information comes through in the Akashic records, there's sort of this uncomfortableness because they might not feel ready to be able to make the step in the direction of what the Akashic records is revealing. And I'm constantly reminding them of, your decision is your decision. You are loved. You're in the field of this, regardless of whether or not you participate with it. And so there is, because of the place has no time or space, it doesn't matter whether or not we align with it in that moment. We're still going to be able to have access to whatever it is that we call support in the non-physical realm at any time. So I think that that's a big component, is just reminding people that you're sovereign. You get choice. You can move with what's coming through and you can not move with it. You can put it on hold for 6 months and come back and revisit it. But what I find most fascinating is, I can't fully comprehend it, but there's a filtration system with the Akashic records. So I don't have access to the all-knowing realm when I open up someone's Akashic records. I have access to the information that the all-knowing realm is filtering down into the reading on that day. And that's a really important distinction that I think a lot of people don't talk about when they work with the Akashic records. So by that, what's important to understand is then I have full faith or trust or understanding that whatever information is coming through in that moment, it's coming through because that individual is ready to receive it, whether they are consciously aware of it or not. So sometimes I have to say, like, German, like, I'm going to get you just to anchor in a little bit because what I'm going to say might be a bit much, and you get to take it or leave it if you want to play with it. But oftentimes my humanness thinks that it's a big deal, and it's not a big deal to the person that I'm sharing it with. So even that filters into the whole process, right?
Understood.
Yeah.
After accessing the Akashic records or having a reading, what's the most important thing a person should do with the insight? How do we ground spiritual revelation into daily life and decision making?
Well, I think that's maybe where I kind of, that's probably where I have a bit of a distinction from maybe other people that read the records, in that for me, I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's no point, like everything that we're playing with in the spiritual realm, it has to densify and come back into this human experience. Otherwise, what's the point? So when I do an Akashic reading with someone, usually it kind of moves in a circular way, in the sense that when I open up someone's Akashic records, there's information that's kind of sitting right there on the cusp. I'll share it with them. And then what I notice in sort of the first 10 minutes or so, whether they're asking questions or I'm just sharing with what's coming through organically by just filtering down, there starts to build a bit of a theme to the Akashic reading on that day. And so we usually end up moving in a full circle, so that by the end of the Akashic reading, it's almost like it's ribboned up and tied up in a bow, in the sense that, like, here's what came forward. Here's what we cleared in order for you to be able to access what it is that you're working on next. And then here's some action steps that are available for you to work with, so that you're ensuring that what is being, what is available to you on an energetic level is being densified and put into a more firm root system by the actions that we do in the physical realm. Whereas I think sometimes Akashic record, so everyone that comes and books a reading with me, there is a certain type of client that I attract in. It's usually people that already have a good sense of what their purpose is, and they're wanting to expand and grow from there, or they want more clarity on what their purpose, their incarnated purpose is in this lifetime, and how to work with it in a more focused, attentive way. Whereas some people are, they'll book an Akashic reading because they just want to go into past lives. It's not, I only go into past lives to help support what's happening in present moment. But other people might book a session and it's almost like entertainment, German, like where they're just getting a lot of information about all these past lives that they've had, but at the end of the session, they don't really know what to do with it.
Right.
And so that's where I try and really give people, like, here's what came through, here's what we cleared, here's what's open, and here's how you can work with it going forward. So there's kind of it has purpose. It makes sense.
You teach yoga, breath, and energy work alongside your spiritual teachings. What role does the physical body play in our spiritual evolution, and why is embodiment so critical in this awakening process?
It goes back to the inability to separate the two. So even though when I'm doing, so yes, predominantly my work in the past was with the physical body, doing physical yoga practices, and then I would sprinkle in consciousness and spirituality as best I could in that sort of 75-minute class. Now where it's transitioned is I spend a lot of time on Zoom, because most of the trainings that I do are international. So when we're learning how to read the Akashic records, we are online. And so there is an absolute emphasis when we're doing this training that even though we're sitting in this space for 6 hours at a time, it needs to be bookend on either side with physical movement, because there's so much that's going to be pulled up emotionally that comes forward. What I was talking about earlier, like the worry about being able to read the records. I've spent a lot of money. Am I going to be able to get value for that when I'm done? I'm giving up my time and energy. Is it going to be worth it? So there's a lot of emotion that comes up when people come into a training. And if there's no movement practice to be able to help to run that chemistry through their body and release it out, I find it becomes a lot, then people end up a lot in their head when they move through the training, right? So the physical body is absolutely necessary to move. Now, I don't give specific, like I work mostly with adults, so I'll just say, like, whatever you know your movement to be that's most effective for you, do it. Whether you need to put on some music and just rock out for a couple songs before we start, if you want to go for a run, if you want to do yoga, if you weight train, whatever it is, but feel like a cathartic release when you're moving through your physical movement. And that settles the nervous system, it settles the energetic system, so that when you go to sit, the body's going to comply and not fight you. Right? So you want to make sure that the system's not fighting against itself. If I go and sit down, this is also why, like, personally, I'm not super restrictive of when I do what I do and how I choose to express it. So, for example, on any given day, my spiritual practice might be a lying down breathwork practice. It might be a seated meditation. It might be a yoga practice. It might be yoga nidra, another lying down version of connecting. But I check in with my physical body, and I'm asking, what is it that you need in this moment? If I'm super tired and forcing myself to sit in meditation, and the whole time I'm just fighting the fatigue, it's not an effective experience for me. So on that day, I might lie down and do a different version of a practice, a breathwork practice or a nidra. If I feel quite alert and awaken, then I'm going to be better off doing a meditation practice. And then same with the movement, right? Sometimes I would love to have a body where I could get up at 6 a.m. and do a really great yoga practice. Every time I get up at 6 a.m., I pull a muscle if I'm doing yoga. I just can't do it. But I can go and weightlift for an hour, or I can go for a walk in nature for an hour. So I really listen to my body in the sense of, like, what is it that you need on this day, rather than just treating it like a machine and just robotically going through the motions of it. Yeah. Even food and diet, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And your body speaks. It tells you, if you're attentive, what you should be doing or what you should be consuming at this time. You know.
And I get it. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, initially, when we are so far removed from our body and its signals, we will probably need an external source to help to get us back in towards ourselves, right? So we might need someone to help set us up for a diet that is more effective and gives us more energy. We might need someone else to show us how to train the body and get it into better shape. But then eventually, once we've gone from the external and we've gotten the information that we need from it, then this is the spanda, the energy of life. It's contraction and expansion. So we've expanded out. We've used an external source. We've helped create a system in our body that is working. So then I'm going to go internal and just see what needs to be tweaked. Right? Yeah.
No, you listen to that inner GPS now that guides you.
Yeah. But initially, for a lot of people, they don't know what they want.
Right. And
so it needs to be activated sometimes by a teacher, a mentor, a coach, a trainer, whatever word you want to put in there, a therapist, a counselor, right? To start to bring them in closer to whatever layer of the body feels far away from them. And then eventually they start to be able to access it on their own internally. And it's a forever process. That's the other thing. So I'll go into contraction for maybe months or even a year where I'm just in my own cocoon doing my own thing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I need to come back into the connection of all of life. And I need an external source. And then the external source gets to a point where now it's distracting and I'm not actually doing anything. So now and that's a forever process, the contraction and the expansion. But when we have hierarchy, of one being better than the other, then that's where we start to get dogmatic with whatever it is that we're playing with.
Got you. There's a deep resurgence of the divine feminine in the collective right now. And much of your work feels connected to that energy, receptivity, intuition, flow. How do you see the rise of feminine wisdom shaping this next stage of human evolution?
I'm going to go just a little step further, and like when you start to play with the divine feminine, it eventually will lead you to the divine masculine. And when you start to play with the divine masculine, it eventually will lead you to the divine feminine. So when they're each in their most authentic form and not in shadow, but in like their light, to me, they're one and the same. So I don't intentionally offer anything specifically for the divine feminine because, number one, I think that men need to be included in more experiences that are available in the spiritual realm. And men and women collectively need to be in spaces together. So there's a lot of spaces where people need to be in the singular form based on trauma or whatever circumstances have led them to that, which is important. And so many good people are working in that capacity, and I thank them intimately for doing that. But for me, I really love to work with the divine masculine and the divine feminine cohabitating, working together. So I think it's great that the feminine energy is on a rise, but it'll pendulum if we don't honor the masculine simultaneously.
And the problem we had with the masculine at one time, but now we're going to have the problem with the feminine.
Exactly. So, and I have a husband and I have a son, and I'm aware of how excluded society is, the exclusion that comes with glorifying the feminine, right?
Got you.
Right. So, so I try to play with the equanimous space in between as much as I can.
Walk that center path.
Yeah. But how about you? Like, how would you answer that? Because
I'll take the same position, because what I'm seeing, even with what we call in the divine feminine, which to me is not necessarily divine feminine, but women trying to be what men were. So they are awakening more masculine in their femininity and calling that the divine feminine because it's coming from a female.
Right. Yeah.
So that in itself is an issue. But there must be balance. And you alluded to that earlier when you're talking about that, both sides, and with the physical and the spiritual. You must take that center path. So that's my take.
Yeah.
As more people step into the role of spiritual leader, guide, or healer, what do you feel are the core principles that must anchor true leadership? What keeps a guide aligned with integrity in a world full of noise and ego?
Well, to be a forever student is very important. To always be a student first and a teacher second. And to have really good people in your life to cross-check you when needed, right? To be able to call out the arrogance if it's starting to show up, to remind of humility, compassion. I think that the more that I work with Akashic trainings, what I'm noticing is to remind myself that although this is maybe the 20th training that I'm leading, for everyone else in the room, it's the first. So there has to always have this very beginner mindset or compassionate edge that comes forward. And then I spend a lot of time, looking at my relationship with power. I think that's also a critical point as well, especially when we're entrepreneurs and we have to wear all the hats of, accountant and secretary and marketing and facilitator and, administration and all the different layers that we wear as entrepreneurs. The consistency of allowing ourselves to be formidable, to be able to apologize and say sorry if we make mistakes, to be able to learn, to be able to ask for feedback. Power is a very interesting relationship, and it's important that it's personalized for people. Same way with money, right? Money is a form of power. When I first started working in the field that I'm doing, there was a lot of conversation that I had to have in the opposite. For me, money was very corrupt. It was a very negative topic for me. And so I had to consciously go out and find evidence in the opposite direction to be able to hold conversation with my relationship with money in the same way that we do with power. So just how you can see examples every day of like people corrupting with power, you can also go and hunt for it in the opposite direction, so that as your ceiling of your power level hits, you don't fall back down. You press the edge and see what is available, what is beyond that ceiling, what else is available to us. And it's important to do, because more people in the field of consciousness need to be sitting at the tables with the big stakes that are controlling things right now. And if you can't clean up your money and you can't clean up your relationship with power, you're not helping anything.
I think you gotta put a check on that ego constantly.
Yeah.
Heather, we've been talking for about 55 minutes. It feels like 15 minutes. I could go for another hour, but I know you probably got a list of people waiting on you to do readings and stuff. If you could speak directly to the collective consciousness right now, to the hearts of those who feel lost, numb, overwhelmed, or uncertain of their place in this world, what would you want them to hear? Not from the mind, but from your soul. What final message are you being called to leave with us today?
To constantly ask, is that true? To not believe the thought that you're having in this moment.
Very profound. Very, very profound. You would not believe, because we get in so much conflict with ourselves about thoughts and ideas that is not even based on anything valid.
Yes. Yeah.
Heather, thank you for your presence, your clarity, and your unwavering devotion to helping others remember who they truly are. This conversation wasn't just about spiritual ideas, it was about spiritual embodiment, about listening to the voice within, honoring the wisdom of the body, and recognizing that the divine isn't something we find out there, it's what we awaken to within. And if you're listening right now, maybe unsure of your path or feeling like the world is louder than your soul, let this episode remind you, you don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need a title to walk with purpose, and you don't need permission to remember what you are. You are here for a reason. If this conversation moves something in you, I invite you to share it, subscribe to the podcast, and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We are just getting started on this journey of rediscovering the divine human. But before I said until next time, I would like Heather to share her contacts, her website, which I would include in the description. So all who have listened, if you want to contact her and get a Akashic reading or whatever, you'll be able to contact her. Heather?
So the best way to contact me is through my website. It's just my name, heatherivany.com, Ivany. And there's lots of options to play with there. There's a spiritual reset that you can sign up for that's free. There's lots of YouTube videos connected there that are free. This podcast will be uploaded there. And then you just follow different ladders and see what resonates with you. But always open to hearing people's feedback and comments or questions that they have. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You're most welcome. So until next time, walk boldly, listen deeply, and of course, live audaciously. Audacious Rebel.